The sound of tearing paper was louder than the jet engines outside. In Terminal 4 of JFK International, hundreds of passengers froze as Lydia Holloway, the senior flight attendant for Regal Horizon Airlines, ripped a first-class ticket into confetti and threw it into a black woman's face. "People like you," Lydia sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "Don't sit in seats like this. Get out of my line." She thought she was protecting the airline's image. She thought she was untouchable. She was wrong. Because the woman she just humiliated wasn't just a passenger. She was Dr. Vivian Toussaint, and the name on that shredded ticket was about to ground the entire fleet and end Lydia's career in seconds. This is the story of how arrogance met its match, and karma arrived with a vengeance. Regal Horizon Airlines Flight 892 to London Heathrow was already 40 minutes delayed, and the air in JFK's Terminal 4 was thick with the scent of stale coffee and rising temper. The departure lounge was a sea of agitated travelers, tapping their feet and checking their watches, but behind the sleek, navy blue counter of Gate B12, Lydia Holloway stood like a queen guarding her castle. Lydia had been with Regal Horizon for 15 years. In that time, she had curated a reputation that was equal parts efficient and terrifying. With her blonde hair pulled back into a bun so tight it seemed to pull the skin of her face taut, and a uniform that was perpetually lint-free, she viewed herself not as a service worker, but as the final filter for the elite. She had a sixth sense. She often bragged to the junior attendants for spotting upgrades people who tried to sneak into sections where they didn't belong. Today, her mood was particularly foul. The heating system in the terminal was malfunctioning, leaving the air dry and stifling, and her feet were throbbing in her regulation heels. To make matters worse, the flight was overbooked. "Excuse me, ma'am." A young man in a hoodie approached the podium. "My app says boarding started 10 minutes ago." Lydia didn't even look up from her computer screen. "The app is an estimate. We board when I say we board. Step back, please." The young man blinked, stunned by the icy dismissal, and retreated. Lydia smirked. She loved that power, the power to make grown men step back with a single tone of voice. Beside her was Sarah, a new hire who was barely 22 and looked like she was vibrating with anxiety. "Lydia," Sarah whispered, checking the monitor. "We have a VIP flagged on the manifest. A Dr. Toussaint. The system says we need to offer pre-boarding." Lydia waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Doctors are a dime a dozen on these flights, Sarah. Probably some cosmetic surgeon from Miami flying over for a conference. They can wait in line like everyone else. I'm not rolling out the red carpet for someone just because they have a PhD in Botox." The queue for first class began to form. It was the usual parade of bespoke suits, designer luggage, and the casual arrogance of the frequent flyer. Lydia scanned them with approval. This was her crowd. Then, she saw her. Standing at the back of the first-class line was a woman who didn't fit Lydia's narrow definition of first class. She was black, tall, and dressed in simple, comfortable travel clothes, a loose beige linen set, and flat sandals. She wore no jewelry, no flashing Rolex, no Louis Vuitton scarf. She carried a worn leather tote bag that looked like it had seen better days. She stood with a quiet stillness, reading a paperback book, seemingly unbothered by the chaos around her. Lydia's eyes narrowed. The sixth sense tingled. Economy, Lydia thought. Definitely economy, probably trying to sneak an early board to steal overhead bin space. The line moved forward. A businessman in a gray suit handed Lydia his boarding pass. She beamed at him. "Welcome back, Mr. Henderson. Seat 2A. Enjoy the champagne." He nodded and passed through. The woman in the linen set stepped up next. She didn't rush. She closed her book, placed it in her tote, and held out a printed boarding pass. She didn't smile, but her expression was polite. "Good morning," the woman said. Her voice was low, smooth, and possessed a gravity that Lydia immediately disliked. Lydia didn't take the ticket. She crossed her arms and leaned over the podium, dropping her voice to a patronizing volume. "Ma'am, I think you're confused. This is the priority lane. Group 1 only. Economy boarding is in 45 minutes. You need to go sit down." The woman paused. She didn't flinch. She simply held the paper out a little further. "I am aware of the boarding groups. I am in seat 1A. Lydia let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound like glass breaking. "1A? Honey? 1A is reserved for full fare. First class. That ticket costs $12,000. She looked the woman up and down, making a show of inspecting her plain clothes and the worn bag. I'm going to ask you once to step aside before I call security. You are holding up my paying customers. The people behind the woman began to murmur. Some were annoyed at the holdup, others looked uncomfortable at Lydia's tone. Check the ticket, the woman said. She wasn't pleading, she was commanding. Lydia felt a flush of heat rise up her neck. She hated being told what to do, especially by someone she deemed beneath her station. She snatched the paper from the woman's hand. Fine, Lydia snapped. I'll check it. And when it scans red, you're going to be escorted out of this terminal. Lydia jammed the barcode under the scanner. Beep. A green light flashed on the screen. Site una, tusa, vivia, status. Alliance premier. Lydia stared at the screen. The computer had accepted it, but Lydia's mind couldn't accept it. It had to be a glitch. Or worse, a fraud. She had heard of people photoshopping boarding passes to sneak into first class. There was no way this woman, with her scuffed bag and lack of diamonds, was a premier member. This is fake, Lydia declared loud enough for the first 5 rows of seats to hear. I beg your pardon? The woman's eyebrows raised slightly. You heard me, Lydia said, her voice rising. This is a fraudulent ticket. I don't know where you printed this, or whose account you hacked, but Regal Horizon doesn't tolerate scammers. Sarah, the junior attendant, leaned over. Lydia, the screen says confirmed. Maybe we should just... Quiet, Sarah, Lydia snapped. She turned back to the woman, her face twisting into a sneer. You think because the computer is stupid, I am too? I know your type. You think you can talk your way into luxury. Not on my flight. The woman took a step closer to the counter. The atmosphere in the terminal shifted. The murmuring stopped. Every eye was glued to gate B12. My name, the woman said, articulating every syllable, is Dr. Vivian Toussaint. I suggest you look at that screen one more time, and then look at the policy regarding passenger harassment. That was the breaking point. Lydia didn't like being threatened with policy. She was the enforcer of policy. You want to talk about policy? Lydia grabbed the printed boarding pass with both hands. Here is my policy on fraud. With a dramatic, violent motion, Lydia ripped the boarding pass down the middle. Then she stacked the halves and ripped them again. She threw the pieces over the counter. They fluttered down, hitting the woman's chest before falling to the dirty airport carpet. Ticket invalid, Lydia smirked, dusting her hands off. Now get out of my line, or I'm calling the police to have you arrested for forgery. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. Dr. Vivian Toussaint looked down at the shredded paper at her feet. Then she looked up at Lydia. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't cause a scene. She simply reached into her tote bag, pulled out a sleek, black satellite phone, the kind used by high-level government officials and corporate titans, and dialed a single number. Hello, Arthur, she said into the phone, her eyes never leaving Lydia's face. It's Vivian. We have a problem at JFK. Code red. Freeze the flight. Lydia rolled her eyes as the woman spoke into the phone. Arthur? Code red? It was pathetic theater. Passengers often tried to fake call their lawyers or uncles who work for the airline when they got caught. It never worked. Ma'am, put the phone away and vacate the area, Lydia barked, reaching for the landline to call airport security. You are now trespassing. But before Lydia could lift the receiver, something strange happened. Behind her, the jet bridge door, the secure door that led to the plane, beeped loudly. The electronic lock disengaged. The captain, a stern man named Robert McKinnon, with 4 stripes on his shoulders and 30 years of flying experience, burst through the door. He looked frantic. He wasn't wearing his hat. He looked like he had just run from the cockpit. Who is handling the gate? Captain McKinnon shouted, his voice booming. Lydia froze, her hand hovering over the phone. She put on her best professional smile, though her heart hammered. I am, Captain. I was just dealing with an unruly passenger who attempted to board with a fraudulent... Stop, McKinnon ordered. He wasn't looking at Lydia. He was scanning the crowd. Where is she? Operations just radioed me. They said she's at the podium. Who, sir? Lydia asked, confused. Dr. Toussaint, the captain yelled. Lydia's stomach dropped. She pointed a shaking finger at the woman standing calmly in front of the counter. Her? She's the fraud. I just confiscated her ticket. She's pretending to be. Captain McKinnon ignored Lydia completely. He rushed out from behind the counter, bypassing the security barrier, and walked straight up to the woman in the linen set. To everyone's shock, the captain, the highest authority on the plane, bowed his head slightly. "Dr. Toussaint," McKinnon breathed, looking pale. "I am so incredibly sorry. I had no idea you were checking in personally. We were told you were flying private." The woman, Dr. Toussaint, lowered her phone. She looked at the captain with a gaze that could cut steel. "Hello, Robert. It's been a while since the merger meetings." "It has, ma'am," McKinnon stammered. Lydia watched, her mouth slightly open. "Merger meetings?" "I decided to fly commercial today, Robert," Vivian said calmly, gesturing to the shredded paper on the floor. "I wanted to see how the new service excellence protocols we implemented were trickling down to the ground staff. I think I have my answer." Lydia felt the blood drain from her face. Her knees turned to water. "Protocols?" Lydia squeaked. Captain McKinnon turned slowly to look at Lydia. His face was a mask of fury. "Lydia," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Do you know who this is?" She's a passenger," Lydia stammered. "This is Dr. Vivian Toussaint," McKinnon announced, his voice carrying to the curious passengers straining to hear. "She is the chairwoman of the Aurora Global Group." Lydia blinked. Aurora Global. The name sounded familiar. Then it hit her like a physical blow. Aurora Global was the massive conglomerate that had acquired Regal Horizon Airlines 3 months ago. This woman wasn't just a passenger. She wasn't just a VIP. She was the owner. She effectively signed Lydia's paycheck. And Dr. Toussaint added, her voice ice cold, "I am the woman whose ticket you just threw in the garbage because you decided I didn't look like I belonged in your first-class cabin." The crowd gasped. A few people took out their phones and started recording. Lydia began to tremble. "Dr. Toussaint, I was just following protocol for suspicious." "Suspicious?" Vivian cut her off. "What was suspicious, Miss Holloway? Was it my luggage? Or was it the color of my skin?" The accusation hung in the air. Lydia opened her mouth to defend herself, but no words came out. She was drowning. And she knew it. I didn't mean..." Lydia started to cry, the tears tracking through her heavy foundation. "Please, I have a mortgage. I've been here 15 years. 15 years of bullying, from what I just witnessed," Vivian said. She turned to the captain. "Robert, is the plane fueled?" "Yes, ma'am. Ready to go." "Good," Vivian said. "But this flight isn't leaving yet. Not with this crew." She looked back at Lydia, then at the rest of the gate agents. "Shut down the gate," Vivian ordered. "Nobody boards. I am grounding this flight until I speak to the Director of In-Flight Services. And I want the airport police here, now." "Police?" Lydia gasped. "For what?" Vivian stepped over the shredded ticket, moving into Lydia's personal space. "For destruction of private property and discrimination. You wanted to call security on me? Let's save you the trouble. They're already on their way." As if on cue, 3 TSA officers and 2 NYPD officers came jogging down the terminal corridor, parting the sea of stunned passengers. The arrival of the police turned the tense situation into a spectacle. The officers approached the podium, hands resting near their belts, looking from the weeping flight attendant to the composed woman in linen. "What seems to be the problem here?" the lead officer, a burly man named Officer Miller, asked. "She assaulted me," Lydia blurted out, trying a Hail Mary. "She threatened me and caused a disturbance." Officer Miller looked at Dr. Toussaint. "Is this true, ma'am?" Vivian didn't answer immediately. She turned to the crowd of passengers. "Did I assault this woman?" "No," a dozen voices shouted back in unison. Mr. Henderson, the businessman Lydia had charmed earlier, stepped forward. "Officer, I'm Greg Henderson, attorney at law. I witnessed the whole thing. This agent," he pointed a damning finger at Lydia, "shredded this lady's ticket and verbally abused her." The lady didn't raise her voice once. Lydia glared at Henderson, betrayed. You were supposed to be on my side." "I'm on the side of decency, Lydia," Henderson said coldly. "And frankly, you were rude to the family behind me too." Vivian turned back to Officer Miller. "Officer, I am Dr. Vivian Toussaint. I am the chairwoman of the parent company that owns this airline. I would like to file a formal complaint against this employee for destruction of property, my boarding pass, and for discriminatory conduct. I also want her removed from this terminal immediately, as she is a liability to my customers." Officer Miller raised his eyebrows. He looked at Lydia, who was now hyperventilating. "Ma'am," Officer Miller said to Lydia, "I'm going to need to see your ID and security badge." "You can't do this," Lydia shrieked. "I run this gate. I decide who flies." "Not anymore," Captain McKinnon said, stepping in. He reached over the counter and typed a command into the terminal computer. The screen behind the desk flashed, "Logout complete." "Lydia Holloway," the captain said formally. "By the authority vested in me as captain of Flight 892, and under the direct instruction of the chairwoman, you are relieved of duty. You are to surrender your badge." Lydia clutched her badge to her chest. "No, you can't fire me. I have a union." "The union protects workers," Vivian said softly. "It doesn't protect bigots. Hand it over." Trembling, Lydia unclipped the badge. She slammed it onto the counter. "You'll regret this," she hissed at Vivian. "You think you can just walk in here and ruin my life?" "You ruined your own life, Miss Holloway," Vivian replied. "I just turned on the lights so everyone could see it." Officer Miller gestured for Lydia to step out from behind the podium. "Ma'am, come with us. We need to take a statement regarding the disturbance." As Lydia was escorted away by the police, flanked by the very security she had threatened to call on Vivian, the terminal erupted into applause. It wasn't polite golf claps. It was a roar of vindication. Lydia kept her head down, the shame burning her face, as she walked past the hundreds of people she had looked down on for years. But the drama wasn't over. Vivian turned to the remaining gate agents, Sarah and a young man named David. They looked terrified, expecting to be fired next. "You two," Vivian said gently. Sarah flinched. "Yes, Dr. Toussaint, we're so sorry, we tried to tell her." "I know," Vivian said. "I heard you trying to warn her. You did your job. You are not in trouble." Sarah let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for a year. "However," Vivian continued, raising her voice so the passengers could hear, "this flight is delayed. The captain and I need to have a serious conversation with the regional managers. I cannot allow this plane to take off until I am sure every member of this crew understands the values of Aurora Global." A groan went through the crowd. A delay was still a delay. But Vivian smiled for the first time, to apologize for the inconvenience and the unpleasant show you just had to witness. "I am authorizing full refunds for every single passenger on Flight 892. The groans turned into stunned silence. "And," she added, "everyone is getting a voucher for a future round-trip ticket." "Sarah, David, please start processing the vouchers. I'm going to have a talk with the captain." The cheer that went up was deafening. Vivian picked up her tote bag. She looked at the shredded ticket on the floor one last time. She bent down, picked up the pieces, and put them in her pocket. She would frame them, a reminder that no matter how high you fly, you never look down on people. She walked toward the jet bridge with Captain McKinnon. But as they entered the quiet of the tunnel, Vivian's phone rang again. It was the board of directors. News had leaked. The video of Lydia shredding the ticket was already on Twitter. It had 200,000 views in 10 minutes. "Vivian," the voice on the other end said, "we have a PR nightmare. The press is swarming Heathrow, awaiting your arrival. And we found out something else about Lydia Holloway." Vivian paused. "What?" She wasn't just a flight attendant. Her brother-in-law is the VP of operations for the East Coast. That's why she felt so untouchable. He's on his way to the airport now, and he is furious. He's threatening to ground the whole fleet if you don't reinstate her. Vivian's eyes narrowed. The twist she hadn't expected. The rot went deeper than one bad apple. "Let him come," Vivian said, her voice turning dark. "I have more shredding to do." The atmosphere at Gate B12 had shifted from chaotic noise to an eerie, electric anticipation. While the passengers of Flight 892 were busy texting friends and posting videos of the ticket shredder incident, a new energy was brewing near the security checkpoint. Dr. Vivian Toussaint stood in the glass-walled jet bridge, conferring with Captain McKinnon. They were discussing the logistics of replacing the lead flight attendant so the plane could legally depart. But the conversation was cut short by the sound of heavy, furious footsteps pounding against the thin carpet of the terminal ramp. "Where is she?" a voice roared, echoing off the metal walls. "Where is the person who thinks they can hijack my airport?" Captain McKinnon flinched. He recognized that voice. It belonged to Grant Reynolds, the vice president of East Coast operations for Regal Horizon. Reynolds was a man who wore Italian suits that cost more than a Honda and carried himself with the heavy, blunt force of a sledgehammer. He was known for two things: cutting costs to the bone and protecting his favorites. And Lydia Holloway was his sister-in-law. Reynolds burst into the jet bridge area, bypassing the stunned gate agents, Sarah and David. He was a large man, red-faced and sweating, flanked by two junior operations managers who looked like they would rather be anywhere else. "McKinnon!" Reynolds barked, ignoring Vivian completely. "I just got a call from the airport police saying you authorized the removal of my senior attendant. Have you lost your mind? Do you know how much money we lose for every minute this bird sits on the tarmac?" "Mr. Reynolds," the captain said, his posture stiffening. "Lydia Holloway violated multiple codes of conduct. She destroyed a passenger's ticket and engaged in discriminatory harassment. I had no choice." "You always have a choice, Bob," Reynolds sneered, moving into the captain's personal space. "You choose loyalty. You choose the people who sign your flight logs. I want Lydia released from custody immediately, and I want her back on this plane. If she doesn't fly, nobody flies. I'll pull the ground crew, I'll pull the fuel trucks. I will leave this plane stranded here until next Tuesday." It was a blatant abuse of power, a tantrum thrown by a man used to getting his way through intimidation. He turned to his junior managers. "Call the precinct. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them the passenger provoked her. I wouldn't do that if I were you." A calm voice cut through the tension. Reynolds spun around. For the first time, he acknowledged the woman standing in the shadows of the jet bridge door. Vivian stepped into the light. She still looked impeccable in her linen suit, her expression unreadable. "And who are you?" Reynolds asked, looking her up and down with a dismissive sneer. "The passenger? The one who caused all this drama over a piece of paper? I am the one whose ticket was shredded," Vivian said. "And I am the one telling you that if you reinstate Miss Holloway, you will be burying this airline." Reynolds laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. "Listen, lady, I don't know who you think you are, but you're a guest in my house. This is my terminal, my airline. I don't care if you're a platinum member or the Queen of England. You don't dictate staffing to me." He pointed a thick finger at her face. "Here is what is going to happen. You are going to apologize to the police for wasting their time. We are going to bring Lydia back. You are going to sit in economy, because frankly, I'm downgrading you for being a nuisance. And if you say one word, I'll blacklist you from Regal Horizon for life." Captain McKinnon stepped forward, his face pale. "Grant, stop. You need to listen." "Shut up, Bob," Reynolds shouted. "I'm dealing with the unruly passenger." Vivian didn't back down. She didn't blink. She took out her tablet from her tote bag and tapped the screen a few times. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously smooth. "You seem to be under the impression that Regal Horizon still operates as an independent entity. You seem to have forgotten the acquisition papers signed 3 months ago." "I know who owns us," Reynolds scoffed. "Aurora Global. Some faceless investment group. They sign the checks, I run the planes. They don't care about one flight attendant." "I am Aurora Global," Vivian said. The silence that followed was heavy. Reynolds blinked. "What?" "My name is Dr. Vivian Toussaint. I am the founder and chairwoman of the board of Aurora Global." She turned the tablet around so he could see the screen. It displayed the corporate organizational chart. At the very top, above the CEO, above the board, was her picture. Reynolds stared at the image. Then he looked at Vivian. The resemblance was undeniable. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like he might faint. "Dr. Toussaint," Reynolds stammered, his aggressive posture collapsing instantly. I didn't know. I wasn't informed you were traveling. Usually, we get a protocol briefing." "I know," Vivian said, stepping closer. "And because I traveled incognito, I got to see exactly how you run your house, Mr. Reynolds. I saw a culture of fear. I saw bullying. And now I see nepotism." Reynolds wiped sweat from his forehead. "Ma'am, please. Lydia. She's family. She's been under a lot of stress. I was just trying to protect my employee. It's a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding is forgetting to put a napkin on a tray," Vivian said sharply. Threatening your captain and downgrading the owner of the airline because your ego was bruised is not a misunderstanding. It is gross incompetence. Vivian looked past him to the two junior managers. You two, what are your names? Peter, ma'am, one stuttered. Lewis, said the other. Peter, Lewis, Vivian said. Is it true that Mr. Reynolds threatened to ground the flight if Miss Holloway was not reinstated? The two men looked at Reynolds, who was glaring at them with a look of pure desperation. Then they looked at Vivian, the woman who owned the company. Yes, ma'am, Peter said quietly. He did. He also ordered us to falsify the report to the police, Lewis added, finding his courage. He wanted us to say you were drunk. Reynolds gasped. You traitors! I made you. You're finished, Grant, Captain McKinnon said, his voice grim but satisfied. Vivian tapped her tablet again. Mr. Reynolds, I am placing you on immediate administrative leave, pending a full internal investigation. You are to surrender your credentials and vacate the airport. Reynolds' face turned purple. The shock was wearing off, replaced by the desperate anger of a cornered animal. You can't do that. I have a contract. I have tenure. You can't just fire me on a jet bridge because you're having a bad day. Watch me, Vivian said. I'll sway. Reynolds screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. I know where the bodies are buried, Toussaint. You think you can come in here and clean house? I know about the fuel hedging. I know about the maintenance deferrals. If you fire me, I'll go to the press. I'll burn this whole airline to the ground. It was a threat that would have terrified a normal CEO. Public accusations of maintenance deferrals could crash a stock price in minutes. But Vivian didn't look terrified. She looked amused. The maintenance deferrals, Vivian repeated slowly. You mean the ones you authorized to hit your quarterly bonus targets? The ones I found in the audit last week? Reynolds froze. Did you think I bought this airline without looking at the books, Grant? Vivian asked, her voice soft and deadly. I know about the deferrals. I know about the ghost employees on the payroll names that match your wife's maiden name. I know about the consulting fees paid to shell companies in the Caymans. She took a step closer, her eyes boring into his. I didn't come here today just to check the service, she whispered. I came here to personally serve you your termination papers. The incident with Lydia just made it easier. Reynolds opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was completely exposed. Security, Vivian called out. The same TSA agents who had been lingering nearby, sensing more trouble, stepped forward. Please escort Mr. Reynolds to his office to collect his personal effects, and then off the premises, Vivian ordered. He is no longer an employee of Regal Horizon. Reynolds didn't fight this time. He slumped, defeated, the air completely let out of his tires. As he was led away, he didn't look back. The king of the East Coast had been dethroned in under 5 minutes. Captain McKinnon let out a long, heavy sigh. Dr. Toussaint, thank you. We've been trying to report him for years. The HR complaints always vanished. They won't vanish anymore, Robert, Vivian promised. Now, we have a plane to catch. Do we have a replacement flight attendant? Yes, ma'am, McKinnon smiled. There was a reserve attendant in the crew lounge. She's on her way. Good, Vivian said, smoothing her linen jacket. Let's go to London. The boarding process for Flight 892 resumed, but it was unlike any boarding in the history of JFK. When the announcement was made that boarding would recommence, a cheer went up from the gate area. As Vivian walked back from the jet bridge to the podium to formally scan her ticket, which Sarah had reprinted with trembling hands, the passengers parted like the Red Sea. There was no jostling, no rushing. People looked at her with awe. Thank you, a woman with a baby whispered as Vivian passed. You're a legend, a college student said, giving her a thumbs up. Vivian offered them small, polite nods. She wasn't doing this for the fame. She was doing it because it was right. She approached the counter where Sarah and David stood. Dr. Toussaint, Sarah said, her eyes wide. Here is your boarding pass. Seat 1A. And thank you for what you did for Lydia. And for us, Mr. Reynolds was. He was a nightmare. Nightmares end when you wake up, Vivian said kindly. You handled yourself well today, Sarah. I'm making a note in your file. Expect a promotion to senior purser by the end of the month. Sarah looked like she might cry. Thank you, ma'am. Vivian took her ticket and walked down the jet bridge. She boarded the plane, turning left into the first-class cabin. It was a sanctuary of soft leather and warm lighting. She found seat 1A, a spacious suite with a lie-flat bed. As she settled in, placing her worn tote bag in the overhead bin, the rest of the passengers began to file in. Usually, first-class passengers ignored each other, burying their heads in newspapers or noise-canceling headphones. But not today. Mr. Henderson, the lawyer from the gate, stopped by her seat. "Dr. Toussaint, I just wanted to say, that was the most satisfying thing I've ever witnessed. If you ever need legal counsel that isn't on your payroll, give me a call." He handed her a business card. Vivian smiled and took it. "I appreciate that, Mr. Henderson." The flight filled up. The energy in the cabin was buzzing. The flight attendants, the remaining crew who hadn't been fired, were moving with a renewed energy. The toxic cloud of Lydia and Reynolds was gone, and they felt safe. They were serving drinks with genuine smiles, chatting with passengers, making the delay feel like a party. Just before the cabin doors closed, the new lead flight attendant, a woman named Patricia, picked up the PA system handset. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Regal Horizon Flight 892 with service to London Heathrow," Patricia announced. Her voice was warm and welcoming. "We apologize for the delay, but we promise to make it up to you in the air. We have a special announcement. Due to the extraordinary circumstances of our departure, the chairwoman of our airline has authorized complimentary, open bar, and premium Wi-Fi for the entire aircraft, including economy." A roar of applause erupted from the back of the plane, loud enough to be heard in the cockpit. Vivian sat back in her seat, sipping a glass of sparkling water. She closed her eyes, finally letting the adrenaline fade. She thought the drama was over. She thought she could finally read her book. But fate, it seemed, had one more twist in store. The plane pushed back from the gate and began its taxi to the runway. The engines hummed, a soothing white noise. Vivian opened her book, The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. 10 minutes into the flight, once they had reached cruising altitude, Patricia approached Vivian's suite. She looked concerned. "Dr. Toussaint?" she whispered. "Yes, Patricia? I'm sorry to disturb you, ma'am, but we have a situation in economy." Vivian sighed. "Please tell me nobody else is shredding tickets." "No, nothing like that," Patricia said quickly. "It's a medical issue. A young woman in 34. B. She's going into labor." Vivian blinked. "Labor? We're over the Atlantic. We can't land." "I know," Patricia said. "We have a doctor on board, a plastic surgeon in 4C, but he's not very helpful. He says he hasn't delivered a baby since med school in 1990. He's panicking." Vivian unbuckled her seatbelt. She wasn't just a businesswoman. Before she had founded Aurora Global, before she had taken over the corporate world, Vivian Toussaint had a different life, a life she rarely talked about. "Is the mother stable?" Vivian asked, standing up. "She's in a lot of pain, and the contractions are 2 minutes apart," Patricia said. "She's terrified. Her name is Chloe. She's traveling alone." Vivian smoothed her skirt. "Take me to her." "Ma'am?" Patricia looked confused. "Do you want me to get the captain to turn around?" "No," Vivian said, stepping into the aisle. "There's no time to turn around. And the plastic surgeon is useless. I'll handle it." "You?" Patricia asked. Vivian looked back at her, a small, confident smile playing on her lips. "I didn't always run companies, Patricia. My doctorate isn't in economics, it's in obstetrics. I was an OBGYN for 20 years before I retired to the boardroom." Patricia's jaw dropped. "Boil some water?" Vivian joked dryly. "Actually, just bring me the extensive medical kit and plenty of clean towels, and clear the back row." Vivian marched down the aisle, past the rows of passengers who watched her go. They whispered as she passed. "Where is she going? Is she okay?" Vivian reached the back of the plane. A young woman, barely 20, was curled up across 3 seats, gripping the armrest, sweat pouring down her face. She was crying softly. "Chloe?" Vivian said, her voice instantly shifting from corporate commander to soothing healer. She knelt beside the seats, ignoring the dirty floor. "I'm Dr. Toussaint. I'm going to help you." Chloe looked up, her eyes wide with fear. I'm not due for 3 weeks. I just wanted to go home to my mom in London." "It's okay," Vivian soothed, taking her hand. "Babies have their own schedules. They don't care about flight plans. You're going to be fine." The plastic surgeon from 4C was standing nearby, looking pale and useless. I think she's crowning, he stammered. Step aside, doctor, Vivian commanded, not unkindly. Go sit down and have a drink. I've got this. For the next 2 hours, the drama of the shredded ticket and the corrupt VP was forgotten. The entire plane seemed to hold its breath. The flight attendants turned into nurses, ferrying supplies under Vivian's expert direction. Vivian worked with a focus and calm that was mesmerizing. She was in her element. There was no boardroom politics here, no ego, just life, raw and immediate. Push, Chloe, Vivian encouraged. You're doing amazing. Just one more. I can't, Chloe sobbed. Yes, you can, Vivian said firmly. You are strong. Look at me. You are doing this. And then, somewhere over the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, a cry pierced the hum of the engines. It wasn't a cry of anger or argument. It was the high-pitched, miraculous cry of a newborn. The sound rippled through the cabin. Passengers stood up, straining to see. Vivian lifted the baby, a healthy boy, wrapped in Regal Horizon first-class blankets. She checked his airways, cleaned him off, and placed him on Chloe's chest. He's perfect, Vivian whispered, wiping a smudge of blood from her own cheek. Welcome to the world, little traveler. Patricia, tears streaming down her face, grabbed the PA handset. Ladies and gentlemen, she choked out, we have a new passenger on board. It's a boy. The cabin erupted. This time, it wasn't just applause, it was cheering, whistling, stomping. People were hugging strangers in the aisle. The tension of the day had broken into pure joy. Vivian stayed with Chloe, making sure the placenta was delivered and the bleeding was controlled. She cleaned her hands with antiseptic wipes, her expensive linen suit now ruined with blood and fluid. She didn't care. She stood up and walked back toward the front of the plane, exhausted but exhilarated. As she passed the rows, people didn't just stare. They reached out to touch her arm, to shake her hand. God bless you, an old woman said. You're a hero, a man said. Vivian reached her seat in first class and collapsed. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window. Her hair was messy, her clothes were destroyed, and she was utterly exhausted. She had fired a corrupt flight attendant, taken down a corrupt vice president, and delivered a baby at 35,000 feet. She closed her eyes. Not a bad day, she thought, but the story had one final chapter. The plane began its descent into London, and down on the ground, the media storm that Vivian thought she had left in New York had grown into a hurricane. And this time, it wasn't just about the ticket. The world knew about the baby. When the wheels touched down at Heathrow, Vivian looked out the window. The tarmac wasn't just filled with ground crew. It was filled with news vans, cameras, and a crowd of people holding signs. Vivian groaned. Arthur, she whispered to herself, thinking of her PR manager. You better have coffee ready. She stood up, grabbed her tote bag, and prepared to face the music. But she had one more piece of business to attend to before she left the plane. She needed to speak to Chloe one last time. Because Vivian Toussaint had an idea, a gift for the baby born in the sky. The wheels of Flight 892 kissed the tarmac of Heathrow Airport with a gentle thud, a stark contrast to the turbulence that had occurred on the ground in New York. Inside the cabin, the seatbelt sign flicked off, but nobody moved to grab their bags. The passengers remained seated, a respectful hush falling over the aircraft as paramedics boarded the plane to assist Chloe and her newborn son. Vivian stood at the front of the cabin, her once pristine linen suit now stained and rumpled, her hair escaping its pins. She looked like a warrior who had survived a battle, which, in many ways, she had. As the paramedics carefully lifted Chloe onto a stretcher, the young mother reached out a trembling hand. Dr. Toussaint? Vivian stepped forward, taking Chloe's hand in hers. I'm here, Chloe. What do I name him? Chloe asked, looking at the sleeping infant in her arms. I didn't have a name picked out. I was waiting. Vivian looked at the baby, then out the window at the gray London sky that was breaking to reveal a ray of sunlight. He was born between continents, Vivian mused softly. He belongs to the sky, but he needs a name that means strength. A name that means he survived the storm. She looked at Chloe. How about Phoenix? Because he rose out of the chaos. Chloe smiled through her exhaustion. Phoenix. I like that. Phoenix Toussaint Miller. Vivian laughed. A genuine, hearty sound. You don't have to give him my name. I want to, Chloe whispered. He wouldn't be here without you. As Chloe and baby Phoenix were wheeled off the plane, the passengers broke into one final round of applause. Vivian watched them go, feeling a lump in her throat. Dr. Toussaint? Captain McKinnon appeared from the cockpit. He looked grave. The stairway is attached. The press is at the bottom. Security says there are about 50 reporters. The story about Reynolds and Lydia has gone global, and the news of the baby just leaked via social media. Vivian sighed and straightened her jacket. She tried to brush off the dried blood but gave up. Let them see me like this, she said. The truth is messy, Robert. Let them see the mess. She walked to the door of the aircraft. As she stepped out onto the metal stairs, the flashbulbs blinded her. It was a wall of white light and shouting voices. Dr. Toussaint, is it true you fired your own VP? Dr. Toussaint, did you deliver the baby? What do you have to say to Lydia Holloway? Vivian raised a hand. The crowd quieted down. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice had that natural command that silenced boardrooms and terminals alike. I will make a brief statement, Vivian announced. Today, Regal Horizon Airlines failed. We failed to treat a passenger with dignity. We failed to uphold the standards of basic human decency. She paused, looking directly into a camera lens, knowing that across the ocean, in a police holding cell in Queens, Lydia Holloway might be watching. I encountered an employee who believed that luxury was a club she held the keys to. She judged me by my appearance. She shredded my ticket because she couldn't believe a black woman could sit in seat 1A. But let me be clear. Arrogance is not a qualification for employment at my company. Today, I removed that rot. Lydia Holloway and Grant Reynolds are no longer with us. Not just because they broke rules, but because they broke trust. A murmur of approval went through the press corps. However, Vivian continued, her face softening. In the air, I saw something else. I saw a crew that came together. I saw passengers helping strangers. And I saw a new life enter the world. A baby boy named Phoenix. She smiled. To celebrate his arrival, and to apologize for the chaos of his birth, Aurora Global is granting Phoenix Miller free air travel on Regal Horizon for the rest of his life. And we are establishing a college fund in his name with an initial deposit of $50,000. The reporters gasped. It was the perfect PR move, but Vivian hadn't done it for PR. She did it because, for a few hours, that baby had been the only thing that mattered. Now, if you'll excuse me, Vivian said, stepping down the stairs. I have a board meeting to get to, and I need a shower. As she walked across the tarmac toward the waiting black car, her phone buzzed. It was a text from her head of legal in New York. Update. Grant Reynolds has been formally charged with corporate embezzlement and fraud. The district attorney is looking at 10 to 15 years. Lydia Holloway has been released on bail but is facing charges for destruction of property and filing a false police report. The internet has found her. It's not pretty. Vivian put the phone away. She didn't feel glee. She felt a grim sense of balance. The scales had tipped. Karma had arrived. 6 months later, the winter wind whipped through the open bay doors of the Quick-Go bus terminal in New Jersey. It was a miserable place, smelling of diesel fumes and damp coats. Lydia Holloway pushed the heavy mop bucket across the gray tile floor. Her back ached. Her feet, clad in cheap, non-slip sneakers, throbbed. She wore a gray uniform that was 2 sizes too big, with a name tag that simply read Lydia. There were no first-class lounges here, no champagne, no power trips, just endless streams of commuters who didn't look at her, didn't thank her, and often stepped right over the wet floor sign she had just placed. Hey, you missed a spot, a teenager yelled, kicking a soda can across the floor she had just cleaned. Lydia flinched. She wanted to scream. She wanted to yell, "Do you know who I am? I used to fly to Paris. I used to control the gate." But she couldn't. She knew exactly who she was now. She was the ticket shredder. The video of her meltdown had been viewed 40 million times. It was forever. When she had tried to apply for other airline jobs, they had laughed in her face. When she applied for retail jobs, managers recognized her and politely asked her to leave. This cleaning job at the bus depot was the only thing she could get hired by a manager who didn't use the internet. She dipped the mop into the gray water. Tears pricked her eyes. She thought about Grant. Her brother-in-law wasn't doing much better. He was currently sitting in a federal penitentiary in upstate New York, serving year 1 of a 12-year sentence for defrauding the airline. His assets had been seized. Her sister had left him. The dynasty they thought they had built was nothing but ash. Lydia looked up at the TV screen mounted in the corner of the waiting room. It was tuned to a news channel. On the screen, a sleek, modern airplane was taking off. The headline read, "Regal Horizon rebrands as Aurora Air. Profits soar under new Toussaint standard." The camera cut to Dr. Vivienne Toussaint. She looked radiant, standing at a podium in London, cutting a ribbon. She was announcing a new scholarship program for underprivileged youth to attend flight school. "We believe," Vivienne was saying on the screen, "that the sky belongs to everyone, not just the few." Lydia watched the woman she had tried to humiliate. Vivienne was loved. She was successful. She was changing the world. Lydia looked down at her mop. The bitterness that had fueled her for so long was gone, replaced by a hollow, aching regret. She had held power in her hands, and she had used it to hurt people. Now, she was the one on the ground, watching everyone else fly. "Lydia," her supervisor shouted from the office. "Bathroom 4 is clogged again. Get to it." Lydia wiped her eyes. "Yes, sir," she whispered. She grabbed her bucket and walked toward the bathroom. It was a long way down from first class, and she knew she had a long climb ahead if she ever wanted to find redemption. Meanwhile, in a sun-drenched park in London, Vivienne sat on a bench, wearing a simple trench coat and sunglasses. She held a paper cup of coffee. A young woman pushed a stroller up to the bench. It was Chloe. She looked healthy, happy, and vibrant. Inside the stroller, 6-month-old Phoenix was babbling and waving a toy airplane. He recognizes the sound of engines. Chloe laughed, sitting beside Vivienne. "Every time a plane goes over," he points. Vivienne smiled, reaching out to tickle the baby's toes. "It's in his blood." "I got the letter from the flight school," Chloe said softly. "The one you set up. They said my tuition is covered if I want to train as a dispatcher." "Do you want to?" Vivienne asked. "I think so," Chloe said. "I want to be part of the industry that saved us. I want to make sure people get where they're going safely." Vivienne nodded. "Then do it. We need good people, Chloe." Chloe looked at Vivienne. "You never did tell me. Why were you flying commercial that day? You have your own jet." Vivienne took a sip of her coffee. She looked at the sky, where a silver plane was cutting through the clouds, leaving a white contrail behind it. "I needed to remember," Vivienne said. "When you sit in a private jet, you forget what it's like to wait in line. You forget what it feels like to be small. And if you forget that, you stop being a leader and start being a tyrant." She looked back at Chloe. "I went looking for problems to fix," Vivienne said. "I just didn't expect the problem to be at the front desk. But I'm glad I was there." "So are we," Chloe said, squeezing Vivienne's hand. Vivienne stood up. She checked her watch. "I have to go. I have a flight to catch." "Private?" Chloe asked. Vivienne grinned, her eyes twinkling behind her sunglasses. "No. Commercial, economy class. I hear the service on Aurora Air is excellent these days, and I want to see if the rumors are true." "Safe travels, Dr. Toussaint," Chloe said. "Call me Vivienne," she replied. Vivienne turned and walked away, blending into the crowd of the city. She wasn't seeking applause. She didn't need another viral video. She just walked with the quiet confidence of a woman who knew that true power wasn't about shredding tickets or excluding people. True power was the ability to lift others up, even when the world tries to drag you down. And as she walked, high above her, Flight 892 banked toward the horizon, climbing higher, carrying hundreds of stories into the clouds, flown by a crew that finally understood that kindness was the ultimate luxury. Wow. Talk about instant karma. Lydia thought she was the gatekeeper of the elite, but she ended up locking herself out of her own life. It's a powerful reminder that you should never judge a book by its cover or a passenger by their clothes. Dr. Toussaint didn't just fire a bully. She dismantled a corrupt system and literally brought new life into the world at 30,000 feet. That is what I call a boss move. What did you think of Lydia's punishment? Did she deserve to end up mopping floors, or was that too harsh? And would you have reacted as calmly as Vivienne did? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story about arrogance meeting its match. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind, because you never know who you're talking to.